Microsoft. They had a blowout quarter as well. And I'm looking for my notes really quickly. Where are you?
I'll start you out, Pat.
Yeah,
seeking
yeah. I mean,
you ready?
I'm good. Yeah. So overall revenue, not as impressive as, let's say, an AMD, but very impressive when you look at the scale and the profitability of 19%. Net income was up 44%. That's GAAP, not non-GAAP. But to me, key messages are business was growing where it needed to grow. I mean, where you would expect it to grow. And the businesses that weren't doing very well were ones you wouldn't expect them to do very well. So when you look at SaaS, when you look at cloud, so Azure, Dynamics 365, Xbox, right? People are home playing games. It was up 34%. But the number one key here is Azure, up 50% on a base that I have no idea what it is in terms of dollars yet. And things that, weren't, I mean, server was up 3%, right? That's on-prem, Windows Server, something you wouldn't expect to be up because, as we've seen, a lot of the on-prem businesses aren't growing substantially. So the one final thing I'll point out is that Surface was only up 12%, which was good. But when you've got Apple coming in up 70% in MacBooks and the market's going up 50%, it's less impressive. We don't now. The number is 50% on a unit basis, so we don't know revenue. And Surface does have some lower priced options, but still, I mean, I'd like to see Surface in the 30-40% growth rates in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. The ASPs are up on a lot of the chips for client. We're seeing growth, huge growth from AMD, but Intel had a record quarter there as well, which, Surface has variants of both. I think that's been a little bit of a puzzling spot for me in the overall earnings for Microsoft the past few quarters, is that as strong as PC has been, that Surface hasn't been a little stronger. But let's look at the top. I like your comment about Azure. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know that the market is looking at that 50% growth and continuing to see it 50 plus. Just a few quarters ago, it was running up it was running hot in the 80s and 70s, and then it quickly fell in the beginning part of the pandemic down into the 40s. And people were wondering if they were going to follow the trajectory of the AWS number, which had kind of a law of large numbers, shrinkage and growth quarter over quarter. We're now seeing it kind of stabilizing in the high 20s, low 30s over at AWS. Well, it looks like Azure for now is stabilizing in that 40s and 50s. But again, as you said, we're not really getting a clear indicator on that broken out number. But we do know that the intelligent cloud business is very large. But Pat, here's the thing. For 2 quarters in a row, Microsoft has, I believe it's, I'm just counting it down, I think it's 10 segments that they break their business into. Not one of them retracted this quarter. 10 segments, all of them grew, okay? The smallest growth was in Office consumer products at about 5%, and the largest was Azure. Xbox was up 34%. The company really is delivering on its promise across all of its business units, and it's showing that there's still room to run and room to grow. And that's probably one of the most impressive things, Pat. This was the largest year-on-year revenue growth quarter for Microsoft since 2018. So all the successful quarters that the company's had between 2018 and now, this has been the best. And so it's just another bellwether moment for the tech industry that tech is on fire. And Microsoft is highly diversified. But as I said, this wasn't like growth, even like the Google thing where we talked, or Alphabet, where we talked about ads sort of offsetting. They're growing in every group. They're profitable. Their margins are up. They're operating very successfully. I mean, Dynamics 365 is growing that's their cloud ERP CRM. It's growing in the 40s percentage. So, and you got to compare that with like a Salesforce that's growing around, on their CRM sales in the teens, and on their overall product mix in the 20s. So I've made suggestions before that Microsoft is catching. Well, based on just those percentages, it may be a long route before it would catch, but they're growing at a faster pace than the leader. And so
that's right.
Similar to here is what's happening with Azure versus AWS. And there are some pundits say Azure is making some material gains. Now, again, AWS is over 13 billion. We'll talk more about that later. But Azure is growing at a faster rate continuously quarter over quarter, which does mean, kind of like you mentioned with AMD making market share gains on certain big parts of Intel. Well, Azure is doing something similar with certain parts of AWS, but overall really solid for Microsoft.